Snow pressed against the windows of the Upper East Side apartment, muting the city into a hush that felt borrowed. Hannah Whitmore stood barefoot on the rug, one hand steadying her swollen belly, the other rocking her 6-month-old son against her shoulder. The Christmas tree glowed beside them, patient and forgiving, its lights blinking as if time itself was breathing. She had learned to move quietly in this home, to keep peace by shrinking. Tonight, she told herself, would pass like the others. Her phone rested face down on the counter, buzzing once, then stopping. Hannah didn't turn it over. She had already read the message earlier, the words burning like ice. He promised tonight. The name Brielle Knox had been saved as a florist weeks ago, a lie Hannah kept because lies were safer than truth here. Lucas hated questions. He hated delays. He hated when Hannah looked at him as if she remembered who she used to be. She eased into the sofa, humming the lullaby her mother sang when storms rattled their old house. The baby's breath warmed her neck. Hannah counted it, steady and sure, and let the counting calm the tremor in her hands. Outside, a siren slid past like a reminder that help always belonged to someone else. Inside, the clock ticked toward 9. Lucas arrived without knocking. The door swung open, cold air rushing in, followed by his cologne and impatience. He kissed the baby's head with a performance of tenderness, then glanced at the tree. "We said simple," he snapped. "Why do you need all this?" Hannah didn't answer. She had learned silence was cheaper. The knock came again, sharper this time. Lucas froze. Hannah felt it before she saw it, the shift in the room, the way certainty drains. Brielle stepped inside with a smile that practiced mercy. Her coat was immaculate. Her eyes went straight to Hannah's belly, then away. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, already interrupting everything. Words collided, promises spilled. Hannah stood, clutching the baby, the room narrowing until the lights blurred into stars. She backed toward the tree, needles scratching her wrist. Lucas's voice rose, then fell into a tone Hannah recognized, the one he used to end things. Brielle's heel caught on a cord. Something heavy clattered to the floor, dull and final. Hannah thought of the appointment she missed, the email she never sent, the file she hid behind a recipe on her laptop. She thought of Samuel, the grandfather who once whispered, "Be brave in paperwork." She thought of the doctor with kind eyes who told her to breathe. The baby cried, the lights flickered, the city kept its distance. When it was over, the tree still glowed, the clock kept ticking. And in the hallway, a camera blinked, recording footsteps that would not agree with the story Lucas planned to tell. Downstairs, the doorman's radio crackled, unanswered, while snow kept falling. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor hesitated, hand hovering over a phone, then lowered it. In the apartment, Lucas steadied himself, already rehearsing grief, already choosing which truths to bury. Brielle wiped her shoes, careful, efficient, and glanced at the blinking lights as if they judged her. Hannah's lullaby echoed in the room without a singer. Outside, the city exhaled and moved on, leaving a quiet space where consequences would soon arrive. Above the mantel, a framed family photo tilted slightly, waiting to be straightened by hands that would never return. The camera kept blinking as Lucas smiled, unaware the night had already chosen his ending. Before dawn, before sirens, before lies. Morning arrived without sunlight. Hannah Whitmore woke to a ceiling she did not recognize, the smell of disinfectant, and a weight on her chest that was not pain but absence. Her arms were empty. Her throat was dry. A nurse spoke her name gently, slowly, as if volume might shatter her. Hannah tried to sit up, then remembered why she should not. Her body answered with dizziness and fear. They told her the baby was alive. The words landed like mercy and punishment together. She asked for him once, then stopped asking. Somewhere inside, Hannah understood that asking questions had always been dangerous. It had been safer to listen, to nod, to adapt. Lucas had taught her that lesson carefully over years, not with fists, but with consequences. She remembered the first time she learned to be quiet. It was early in their marriage, in a small apartment near the river. She had asked why his phone was always locked. He smiled, then froze her bank card for a week. "You worry too much," he said. "I handle things." After that, Hannah learned to measure her words like medicine. By the time she became pregnant again, silence was routine. Lucas managed the accounts, the lease, her immigration paperwork. Her green card depended on him. He reminded her often, never loudly, always calmly. "Stress isn't good for you," he would say, whenever she disagreed. Hannah believed him because believing was easier than surviving alone. The doctors spoke around her. Terms like postpartum risk and prenatal trauma floated above the bed. Hannah focused on the edge of the blanket, counting threads. She did not tell them about the money disappearing, or the nights Lucas came home smelling like someone else. She did not tell them about Brielle. When you are trained to disappear, confession feels like rebellion. A social worker arrived with a clipboard and a careful smile. Questions followed. Was Hannah safe at home? Did she feel supported? Hannah nodded, then shook her head, then stopped responding. She had learned that answers could be used against her. Somewhere in the hallway, Lucas's voice carried, steady and sorrowful, rehearsed for sympathy. Later, when she was alone, Hannah reached for the bedside table and found her phone gone. Panic surged, then settled into resignation. Lucas always removed sharp objects first. Phones counted. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the file she hid on her laptop, the note she wrote for Samuel, the backup she prayed would survive. In the afternoon, a man entered quietly. Dr. Ethan Cole introduced himself and did not rush. He explained what he could not, and waited. When Hannah finally looked at him, he did not look away. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said. "Just breathe." She did. Slowly. For the first time in years, someone had given her permission to exist without performing gratitude. Outside the window, snow fell again, covering footprints, pretending nothing had happened. Hannah knew better now. Silence had nearly killed her. And if she survived this bed, this room, this morning, she would need a voice, even if it trembled. Monitors hummed softly. Papers moved between hands. Decisions were being made without her consent. Hannah sensed the machinery of authority turning, slow but relentless. Somewhere, signatures multiplied. Somewhere else, truth waited. Patient, collecting weight, preparing to tip the balance when timing finally allowed it to move lives forever irreversibly. Down the hall, Lucas signed a form with a steady hand, unaware the questions he avoided were already finding answers. Lucas Whitmore learned early that control sounded best when it wore calm manners. By noon, he stood in the hospital corridor with sleeves rolled just enough to suggest exhaustion, eyes red from practiced grief. Nurses nodded. Orderlies slowed. People respond to familiarity, and Lucas offered it freely, like a service. He told the story the same way every time. Hannah had been fragile since the baby. He had begged her to rest. He had stepped out briefly. When he returned, chaos. He did not cry loudly. He pressed his lips together, breathed, thanked everyone. He never mentioned Brielle. He never mentioned the argument. He never mentioned the weight that fell. On social media, sympathy bloomed. A black square, a prayer emoji. Lucas typed a careful caption about love and loss, about privacy, about faith. His phone vibrated with offers of meals and lawyers. He accepted neither. "We're focusing on the children," he said, always plural, as if words could rewrite timelines. Detective questions came softly at first. Lucas answered without hesitation. Dates aligned, times fit. He referenced calendars, receipts, and the building camera he knew well. When asked about money, he smiled. "I handle the finances," he said. "It's simpler that way." Simpler sounded reasonable. Reasonable sounded true. Brielle stayed invisible by design. She deleted messages, archived photos, and blocked names. At home, she rehearsed concern in a mirror, then practiced indifference. Her career depended on timing. She understood storms. She knew when to wait for the wind to pass. Lucas visited the nursery once, standing outside the glass. He did not ask to hold the baby. He spoke about guardianship, schedules, and statements. The social worker wrote notes. Lucas nodded at all the right moments. "Stability matters," he said. "I want what's best." What Lucas wanted was distance from scrutiny. He hired a consultant to manage inquiries, a man who promised silence in exchange for invoices. Together, they drafted a narrative that framed tragedy as illness, loss as inevitability. The words slid into place like furniture arranged for an open house. By evening, Lucas returned to the apartment. The tree still stood. He unplugged it without ceremony. He wiped surfaces, careful not to clean too much. He placed the heavy object back where it belonged. He practiced calling Hannah's name once, twice, until it sounded convincing. A knock interrupted rehearsal. The doorman delivered a bag of mail and a clipped question about the cameras. Lucas answered smoothly, thanked him, closed the door. In the quiet, he opened Hannah's laptop, guessing passwords, missing once, then succeeding. He searched for nothing and found a folder he did not recognize. Inside were screenshots, dates, amounts, and a draft email addressed to Samuel Whitmore. Lucas closed the lid, pulse finally breaking rhythm. He understood then that perfection was fragile and that silence, once broken, could become evidence. He leaned against the counter, breathing, listening to the building settle. Somewhere below, a siren faded. Lucas imagined headlines, then erased them. He deleted the folder, emptied the trash, and smiled at the blank desktop. Yet his hand trembled. He had missed something small, something human. In the mirror, his face looked right, but his eyes did not. He straightened his tie, practiced sorrow again, and picked up his phone. A single voicemail waited, time-stamped earlier, from a number he knew he should fear. It would be played tomorrow, and it would say Hannah's name, proving someone else had listened, saved, and refused to forget the truth he buried tonight before dawn arrived for him without mercy waiting. Brielle Knox never believed in accidents, only leverage. She sat in her apartment overlooking Midtown, scrolling through messages she had already erased once, checking reflections instead of memories. Control was her language. Chaos offended her. Lucas had promised resolution by Christmas. Not love, not honesty, just an ending that cleared space. Brielle accepted terms the way she accepted contracts, with timelines and consequences. She did not scream. She planned. At the hospital, Brielle stayed away. Visibility was a risk before narrative settled. She sent condolences from a burner number, careful words designed to be screenshotted and misunderstood later. Sympathy could be manufactured, proof could not. She reviewed the night frame by frame, correcting mistakes. The heel that caught, the pause too long, the glance toward the hallway camera she pretended not to notice. Brielle cataloged errors like inventory, then decided which could be blamed on shock. Her phone buzzed with Lucas's name. She did not answer. Distance protected both of them, for now. She opened her calendar and moved a meeting, then another. Grief schedules required flexibility. Brielle's advantage was patience. She knew investigators tired, friends drifted, and truth softened at the edges when repeated by people who needed sleep. She would wait until the right question appeared, then step forward as help. Money moved quietly. A transfer here, a purchase there. Brielle liked receipts because they implied purpose. She saved screenshots in a private cloud, labeling them with neutral dates. Order calmed her. She practiced the story she would tell if asked. She had met Hannah once, briefly, and felt concern. She had encouraged rest. She had no idea about the argument. Each sentence was clean, plausible, incomplete. Late that night, Brielle received a voicemail forwarded from Lucas. A man's older voice, steady, formal, saying her name and asking for a return call, Samuel Whitmore. Brielle paused the audio halfway through. She recognized the tone immediately. Authority without anger, experience without threat, the kind of voice that rearranged rooms. Brielle felt the first edge of fear and welcomed it as data. Brielle called back the next morning and left a message that balanced warmth and distance. She expressed sorrow. She offered availability. She did not offer details. When power shifted, silence was capital. Across the city, Lucas assumed Brielle would obey the plan. He underestimated her need to survive alone. Brielle began preparing an exit that looked like loyalty until the last possible moment. She boxed gifts she had never opened and slid them into a closet. She deleted drafts, then printed copies, then hid them where she would remember later. Redundancy was safety. Brielle studied Hannah's face in an old photo Lucas once showed her, smiling beside a tree. She felt nothing resembling guilt, only urgency. Emotions were distractions, outcomes were currency. Before sleeping, Brielle set an alarm and wrote a single line on a notepad. If asked, tell the truth you can prove. She turned off the light and waited. Somewhere else, a server finished syncing a backup that Brielle did not control, time-stamped before midnight. It linked messages, locations, and a call she thought was private. By morning, 2 stories would exist, and only one would survive daylight. Brielle slept with her phone face down, believing preparation was protection. She was wrong. The system remembered what people tried to forget, and it was already counting. Evidence moved quietly between machines, patient, precise, indifferent, waiting for the moment when human confidence failed and alarms rang without mercy, across offices, hallways, inboxes, and screens by dawn without consent ever. Before the investigation hardened, before names turned sharp, Hannah Whitmore became a diagnosis. Charts replaced sentences, notes replaced memory. In conference rooms, professionals spoke carefully about postpartum vulnerability, prenatal stress, and risk factors. None of them asked who benefited when a woman was labeled unstable. Lucas encouraged the language. He nodded when doctors spoke. He repeated phrases he learned quickly, using them like padding around questions. Hannah had been tired. Hannah had been anxious. Hannah had been overwhelmed. He never said afraid. The signs were real, but they were incomplete. Hannah had stopped sleeping because the baby woke every hour. She had eaten poorly because money was monitored. She cried because she was isolated. Each symptom was treated as cause, never context. A psychiatrist reviewed her file and saw a pattern that fit. A social worker underlined notes. Once a story formed, evidence bent to serve it. Nobody asked why Hannah's phone records showed messages drafted but never sent. Nobody asked why her appointments were always rescheduled by someone else. Lucas visited offices with coffee and gratitude. He thanked people for caring. He shared concern about stigma. The room relaxed. Men who sound reasonable are rarely questioned. The narrative stabilized. At night, Lucas reviewed timelines and felt relief harden into confidence. He believed systems preferred simplicity. He believed complexity could be smoothed away. He believed grief granted authority. Across town, Dr. Ethan Cole reread his notes from the emergency intake. He remembered Hannah's eyes, alert despite shock. He remembered her grip tightening when Lucas spoke for her. The memory did not fit the file. Ethan requested imaging reviews and medication logs. He asked why consent forms were signed during sedation. He asked why certain bruises were charted as incidental. The questions were ordinary. The discomfort was not. The hospital administrator suggested patience. The case was sensitive. The family was grieving. Ethan thanked her and kept copies. He had learned that quiet persistence outlasted reassurance. Meanwhile, Brielle watched headlines soften. Words like tragedy and illness replaced confrontation. She exhaled and resumed meetings. Control returned. She almost believed it would hold. Then a nurse mentioned an irregular timestamp. A lab tech flagged a discrepancy. Small things surfaced, unrelated until they were not. Systems speak through margins. Samuel Whitmore arrived in the city without announcement. He requested records, citing authority he no longer held but still carried. Doors opened out of habit. Papers moved. Samuel did not accuse. He read. He listened. He compared handwriting. He asked for camera retention schedules. He thanked clerks by name. Lucas felt the shift before it showed. Calls slowed. Emails delayed. The diagnosis remained, but it began to wobble. Hannah's file gained addenda. Context crept in. Fear appeared where illness once stood alone. Someone wrote the word control in a margin. The tree was taken down. The apartment smelled of dust. Outside, snow melted into gray water, revealing what it covered. Paperwork traveled between departments, copying itself without intent. A clerk noticed mismatched times and whispered to a supervisor. A supervisor requested clarification and logged the request. The log triggered a review. Reviews triggered meetings. Meetings created minutes. Minutes created trails. No single action accused Lucas. Together, they formed pressure. The kind that does not shout, the kind that waits. Hannah's name appeared repeatedly, no longer as a label, but as a person missing explanations. Each signature pushed the balance closer to daylight and away from the comfort of doubt. The illness story cracked when a consent signature failed verification, and one question finally landed where Lucas could not intercept it. The apartment returned to silence the way a stage does after the curtain falls. Props left where they landed. The Christmas tree stood crooked, lights blinking with stubborn cheer, casting soft colors across a room that refused to remember joy. Investigators arrived, measured and polite, asking questions that sounded harmless until answers contradicted themselves. Detective Maya Ortiz noted the cord beneath the tree, unplugged and replugged, timing mismatched with statements. She noted the weight mark on the floor, the scuff by the hallway, the pattern of movement that told a story without words. She asked Lucas to repeat his timeline again. He did, smoother than before, grief shaped into grammar. Neighbors filled gaps with guesses. A couple heard raised voices. Someone heard a thud, someone heard nothing at all. Ortiz listened, writing less than she heard. She asked for camera access, then asked again, then asked the doorman to preserve footage without editing. Procedure sounded boring. It was not. In the nursery, a social worker cradled the baby and documented calm. The child's breathing slowed against a borrowed shoulder. A nurse noticed the infant relaxed when a certain lullaby played from a phone playlist. She logged the detail, small and human, and moved on. Lucas watched professionals work and felt controls slip in inches. He offered tea, he offered condolences, he offered keys. Each kindness arrived a second too early. Ortiz accepted none of it and thanked him anyway. Across the room, an officer photographed the tree, the gifts, the empty space where a photo frame leaned. He paused at the stand, noting sap on the rug and a cable wrapped twice. He photographed again. Brielle's name surfaced quietly when a receipt printed from a shared account. Ortiz did not announce it. She circled it and waited. Waiting made people talk. At the hospital, Ethan reviewed imaging with a second physician. They agreed on timing, they agreed on sequence, they agreed on what did not fit. Ethan wrote a supplemental note, careful and restrained, then forwarded it through channels that created records. Samuel Whitmore arrived at the apartment doorway as the sun tilted west. He did not cross the threshold, he observed. He asked permission. He listened to Ortiz and nodded once. Experience settled in the room like gravity. Lucas attempted familiarity with his father and found none. Samuel's eyes moved from corner to corner, inventory complete. He asked for copies, he asked for times, he asked for names. He thanked everyone and left. That night, Ortiz reviewed footage. A heel caught a cord, a figure exited, returned, exited again. A phone screen lit a face for half a second. The timestamp disagreed with the story Lucas favored. Ortiz flagged it and locked the file. In the apartment, Lucas practiced grief for tomorrow. He stood by the tree and imagined explanations hardening into truth. He did not notice the camera light blinking in the hallway, steady and patient, saving each step. When the building settled and the city breathed between sirens, evidence finished arranging itself. It did not need witnesses, it needed sequence. The night had been rewritten, not by lies, but by the order things happened when nobody believed they mattered. Reports moved upward overnight, copied and time-stamped, while Lucas slept, convinced morning would favor him, unaware that process, memory, and patience were aligning, turning ordinary notes into leverage, and transforming routine procedure into consequence without anger, spectacle, mercy, delay, appeal. By dawn, the timeline no longer belonged to Lucas, and the tree that watched everything would testify without speaking. The first 72 hours after a death are quiet in the wrong ways. Phones ring, forms multiply, and decisions slip into permanence before grief learns to speak. For Hannah Whitmore, those hours became a corridor others walked through, while she remained unheard. Detective Maya Ortiz used the time deliberately. She requested device logs, access records, and medical timelines, framing each ask as routine. Routine lowers defenses. Lucas Whitmore complied, smiling, believing cooperation proved innocence. Ortiz thanked him and wrote everything down. At the hospital, Dr. Ethan Cole documented again. He noted Hannah's responsiveness, her attempts to communicate, and the interruption of consent. He attached objective language, resisting conclusions, letting facts breathe. The chart grew heavier with truth. Social services moved fast. A temporary guardian form appeared for the baby, unsigned. Lucas pressed for speed, citing stability. The social worker paused, sensing urgency that felt rehearsed. She requested oversight. Oversight created delay. Delay created space. Samuel Whitmore spent the hours reading. He compared timestamps across departments, aligning what people said with when machines recorded. He noticed gaps where explanations should be. He requested preservation letters. Files froze in place. Brielle Knox remained unseen, Her absence became noticeable. Ortiz logged it without comment. Patterns reveal themselves when expected elements fail to appear. Neighbors were interviewed again. Statements shifted slightly, not in content but in confidence. Memory adjusted under pressure. Ortiz recorded tone and posture as carefully as words. She asked one neighbor to draw the hallway. The drawing contradicted Lucas's account. A forensic analyst flagged a camera sync issue. The hallway clock drifted by minutes. Corrected, it placed footsteps closer together. Sequence tightened. The night compressed. Lucas felt momentum changing. He called advisors, then dismissed them. He visited the nursery and posed for photographs he would never post. He spoke about legacy. He avoided specifics. In a conference room, Ortiz briefed her supervisor. She presented facts without flourish. The supervisor nodded once. A request was approved. Subpoenas followed. Ethan received a call asking him to testify to timing. He agreed. He did not celebrate. He prepared. Samuel met with a family law attorney and said little. He authorized funds for the child's care. He declined interviews. He wrote a single letter requesting patience. By the third night, the case had weight. Not proof yet, but gravity. The kind that bends outcomes quietly. Paper trails multiplied overnight, emails spawning threads that no one could fully retract. Each request generated responses, attachments, confirmations, and silent acknowledgments. Clerks stamped pages, scanned copies, and logged movements automatically. No single action accused anyone. Together, they formed a map of behavior. Lucas underestimated bureaucracy because it moved without emotion. It did not need anger to advance. It required only time, consistency, and a refusal to forget. Ortiz trusted the process. Samuel trusted experience. Ethan trusted documentation. Even the social worker trusted her hesitation. Systems remember what people deny. They preserve what voices lose. As files accumulated, authority shifted away from performance toward record. The case began speaking for itself, quietly, persuasively, leaving fewer places to hide and fewer words that could survive unchanged when compared against timestamps, metadata, an ordinary human habit observed repeatedly across departments daily nationwide. Lucas slept poorly. He dreamed of blinking lights and unsent messages. He woke, convinced tomorrow would reset. It did not. At sunrise, Ortiz filed a motion, extending the investigation and restricting access to the apartment. The tree remained inside, untouched, waiting. At hour 72, control shifted, and everyone felt it. Even Lucas, even Brielle, even the city that finally leaned closer to listen. Lucas Whitmore believed stories became stronger when repeated with confidence. On the fourth morning, he gathered advisors in a borrowed conference room and rehearsed grief as strategy. He spoke about protecting his son, about respecting Hannah's memory, about moving forward. Each sentence avoided verbs that admitted action. The consultant suggested consistency. Lucas agreed and refined details, shaving minutes, aligning tones. He approved a timeline that sounded compassionate and efficient. Tragedy framed as inevitability soothed listeners. Inevitability absolved responsibility. He filed motions to retrieve personal effects, citing closure. He requested limited access to records, citing privacy. He asked to relocate temporarily, citing safety. The words stacked neatly, persuasive in sequence. Procedure loves order. Brielle watched from a distance, calculating risk. She sent Lucas a single message advising patience and silence. She prepared a statement offering support without proximity. Appear helpful, remain absent. It was a practiced balance. Detective Ortiz reviewed Lucas's filings and noted urgency disguised as care. She requested parallel data, slower and broader. The city complied. Processes mirrored each other, one rushing, one waiting. Waiting often wins. At the hospital, Ethan finalized his addendum. He avoided adjectives. He wrote times, observations, interruptions. He included a sentence noting Hannah's attempt to speak when Lucas entered. It was small. It mattered. Samuel Whitmore requested a meeting with social services. He asked questions that sounded naive and uncovered assumptions. He asked who signed, which form, and when. He asked why speed was necessary. Silence answered him. By afternoon, a preservation order halted Lucas's requests. He masked frustration with gratitude and asked for updates. Ortiz provided none. Lucas returned to the apartment with permission and witnesses. He boxed clothing, careful to touch only what was necessary. He paused at the laptop and felt certainty falter. He closed the lid and sealed the box. In the hallway, a maintenance worker replaced a light and mentioned a camera glitch. Ortiz requested the original feed anyway. Originals matter. That evening, Brielle rehearsed her testimony alone. She timed breaths, softened consonants, practiced sorrow. She believed control lay in preparation. She did not know her messages had synced elsewhere, labeled by time she could not alter. As night settled, data converged, phone pings overlapped with camera frames, purchases aligned with movements. A voice memo surfaced, brief and steady, addressing Samuel by name. It described fear, money, and a plan to be brave. Ortiz compiled a summary and forwarded it upward. It contained no accusations, only sequence. Sequence speaks. Lucas slept, convinced his architecture would hold. He dreamed of signatures turning to ash. When he woke, notifications stacked like dominoes. A request for formal interview, a notice of evidence hold, a reminder that access was revoked. He stood in the quiet kitchen and realized the lie he built to last required more maintenance than truth. Outside, traffic resumed. Inside, the clock advanced without mercy, counting toward a moment when performance would meet record and lose. Records continued updating automatically across departments as midnight passed. Emails linked to tickets, tickets to logs, logs to people. A clerk corrected a typo and triggered a cascade. A server synchronized backups without preference. Ortiz noted the time and secured hashes. Samuel received confirmation and did nothing else. Ethan slept briefly, then woke to alerts. Brielle checked her phone and found silence louder than calls. Lucas stared at the tree stump by the window and felt certainty thin. The city kept moving, indifferent. Somewhere, a file finished uploading, complete, immutable, waiting for review. Consequences assembled quietly, step by step, beyond control, beyond rehearsal, beyond denial for him. Brielle Knox believed timing could save her. On the 5th day, she decided absence looked like guilt and presence could look like courage. She scheduled a voluntary interview and arrived early, coat pressed, voice prepared. Confidence, she assumed, would carry her through. Detective Ortiz greeted her politely and offered water. Brielle declined and smiled. She began with concern for the baby, then distance from the marriage, then shock. Her story was neat. It was also unnecessary long. Ortiz let it run. Questions followed, precise and soft. Brielle answered smoothly, then too quickly. She placed herself near the apartment without saying so, corrected a date no one challenged, and described furniture she claimed she had never seen. Each detail landed like a marker. Ortiz asked about the night. Brielle paused and filled the silence with explanation. She mentioned a cord near the tree and the sound of glass. Ortiz nodded and wrote nothing. Silence does not need ink. Across town, Lucas watched the interview schedule update and felt relief. Brielle was capable. She would protect the plan. He returned calls and spoke about healing. The analyst reviewed phone metadata during the interview. Brielle's device pinged the building twice within minutes of the timeline she denied. A synced message surfaced, sent and unsent, referencing a promise and a deadline. The server timestamp disagreed with her words. Ortiz asked Brielle to repeat her account, slower. Brielle adjusted tone and removed details. The removal created gaps. Gaps invite comparison. Samuel Whitmore received notice of the interview and forwarded a single document. It contained bank transfers labeled innocuously, aligning with purchases made days before the night. Preparation rarely precedes accidents. Ethan Cole submitted a clarification noting audible statements recorded during intake, naming 2 voices, not 1. The note attached waveform times. Machines do not misremember. Brielle sensed the room shift. She asked if she needed counsel. Ortiz said she was free to pause. Brielle continued. Confidence pushed her forward when caution should have stopped her. When the interview ended, Ortiz thanked her and requested her phone for imaging. Brielle hesitated 1 second too long, then agreed. Consent logged, time logged. Outside, snow melted into slush. Brielle texted Lucas a single word, fine, and watched it remain unread. By evening, Comparisons finished compiling. Statements aligned against data, furniture against photos, timelines against pings. Nothing dramatic happened, no raised voices. The case simply tightened. Lucas learned of the request for Brielle's device and felt something cold settle. He told himself devices could be explained. He told himself stories. Ortiz filed a supplemental report recommending status change. The supervisor approved it without comment. The machine advanced. Brielle went home and realized preparation had betrayed her. She had spoken to control the story and instead anchored it. In her mirror, confidence looked like exposure. Elsewhere, paperwork traveled overnight through offices that never slept. Clerks scanned pages, systems reconciled clocks, and backups verified integrity. No one argued, no one speculated. Routine did the work. Each confirmation reduced uncertainty. Each log narrowed options. By morning, requests would become obligations, and obligations would limit movement. People would call it momentum. Ortiz would call it sequence. Samuel would call it patience. Ethan would call it accuracy. Lucas would feel it as pressure. Brielle would feel it as exposure. The city would feel nothing, continuing, while a case learned how to stand upright alone. Without witnesses, headlines, mercy, delay, appeals, excuses, shortcuts, rehearsals, denials, detours, bargains, prayers, shelter. By nightfall, Brielle's words had become evidence, and the plan she trusted turned into the trap she built herself. Money tells the truth when people refuse to. Claire Bennett spread the statements across the conference table and let silence work. Numbers aligned with dates, dates aligned with movements, and movements aligned with lies. The pattern was ordinary and damning, the kind auditors love because it does not argue. Transfers left the joint account days before Christmas, sliced into amounts designed to avoid notice. The funds reappeared as purchases, reservations, and a deposit tied to Brielle Knox. None of it proved intent alone. Together, it proved preparation. Lucas Whitmore sat straighter and explained volatility. Investments fluctuate, gifts happen. He spoke as if vocabulary could smooth arithmetic. Claire asked who authorized each transfer. Lucas answered quickly, then corrected himself. Corrections leave tracks. Detective Ortiz watched without interrupting. She understood financial pressure changes behavior faster than questions. When money speaks, people listen. Samuel Whitmore requested copies and received them. He compared handwriting, signatures, and authorization codes. He remembered teaching Lucas how to sign checks, how to wait, how to think ahead. He recognized the impatience now embedded in numbers. At the hospital, Ethan reviewed billing timestamps and consent logs, charges posted while Hannah was sedated. Authorizations appeared after procedures began. He flagged inconsistencies and forwarded them. Medicine and money rarely intersect cleanly. When they do, accountability follows. Brielle felt the ground shift when her bank called. Routine verification, they said. She answered carefully and hung up too soon. Anxiety makes timing sloppy. Lucas attempted reassurance. He sent Brielle a message reminding her to breathe. The message synced elsewhere, preserved by habit. Habits testify. Claire filed motions to freeze accounts pending review. The judge approved limited holds. Limited is enough. Cash flow slowed. Pressure rose. Lucas appealed to privacy and grief. The court acknowledged grief and preserved evidence. Preservation is not punishment. It is patience with teeth. Paper moved through offices with the quiet violence of routine. Ledgers balanced. Exceptions surfaced. A clerk noticed duplicate authorizations and escalated. Escalation created audit. Audit created trail. Ortiz requested warrants supported by financial sequence. They were granted without spectacle. Boxes arrived with seals intact. Devices queued for imaging. Samuel met Lucas in a hallway and said nothing. Silence weighed more than accusation. Lucas felt judged by arithmetic. By evening, narratives fractured. What Lucas called coincidence read as choreography. What Brielle called support read as incentive. What grief called chaos read as timing. No one raised a voice. No one needed to. The numbers did the talking, steady and exact, stripping intention from performance. Money does not care about charm. As night settled, accounts remained frozen, phones remained boxed, and calendars cleared themselves. Consequences advanced without anger. Somewhere, A spreadsheet recalculated totals and highlighted cells in red. Somewhere else, a baby slept, unaware that paper cuts were bleeding out, a story built on confidence and denial, one transaction at a time, until nothing remained but proof. Morning would bring interviews, seals, and formal language that sounded kind and carried force. Files would travel between agencies, copied, logged, and timed, turning intent into sequence. Lucas would discover that explanations shrink under cross-check, while Brielle would learn that loyalty dissolves under audit. Samuel would wait, patient, knowing truth arrives by schedule, not mercy. Ortiz would sleep, then return, guided by procedure alone. Ethan would testify without drama, only facts, letting records speak. Somewhere a judge would initial a page, and the case would change status, irreversible. Paper kept cutting, thin and precise, until resistance failed, leaving consequences to stand where confidence once stood, exposed and small, awaiting the next signature. The next morning, the file appeared at 6:14 a.m., synced quietly across servers Lucas could not touch. It was titled simply, "For Samuel," and it contained Hannah's voice. Not a scream, not panic, but a steady recording made late at night. She spoke as a woman who had learned caution, choosing words that would survive. The audio opened with her naming dates, amounts, and fear without drama. She described money moving, nights growing colder, and a promise Lucas kept breaking. Then she asked Samuel to protect her son if she failed. The file included screenshots, calendar captures, and a backup key stored off-site. It ended with a sentence written twice, once spoken, once typed. "If you are hearing this, I tried." Samuel listened without moving, then closed his eyes and breathed. He forwarded the file through counsel and preservation channels, adding nothing. Detective Ortiz received it and cross-checked timestamps within minutes. Everything aligned with what procedure had already whispered. Ethan Cole recognized the cadence immediately and annotated his report. Brielle learned about the file when her attorney asked a single question. Lucas learned later, when access requests were denied without explanation. He replayed his story and felt it thin. The voice was calm, maternal, impossible to dismiss as illness. It did not accuse, it documented. Across agencies, the file became a spine that held facts upright. Investigators scheduled formal interviews, now anchored by Hannah's own words. Lucas attempted damage control, but explanations fractured under playback. Brielle considered cooperation and drafted terms that arrived too late. Samuel visited the nursery and held his grandson, silent and steady. He promised nothing aloud and prepared everything in writing. Outside, reporters speculated, but the case no longer needed speculation. Evidence had a narrator, and she was credible. That afternoon, warrants expanded and access narrowed. Phones were imaged, accounts traced, and calendars reconciled. The city continued, indifferent, while the file did its work. Hannah's voice traveled where her body could not. It reached desks, rooms, and minds trained to listen. By evening, a prosecutor approved charges contingent on final review. Nothing dramatic happened. Yet, everything changed. Lucas stared at the denial notice and felt the room shrink. Brielle deleted drafts and realized deletion no longer mattered. Samuel signed guardianship papers and waited. Ethan prepared to testify with the same calm he used at bedsides. The file finished circulating and locked itself by design. Truth, once backed up, is hard to erase. Night fell, and the city lights reflected off windows like witnesses. Inside offices, forms queued for morning signatures. Hannah's recording sat at the center, patient and undeniable. It had waited long enough. Consequences moved closer, guided by her voice. The case now had direction, weight, and a human spine. No performance could bend it anymore. Tomorrow would bring arrests, filings, and a reckoning that would not blink. For the first time, Hannah was speaking, and the system was listening. The voice could not be interrupted again. It would carry them all into daylight, paper, process, and patience aligned behind her truth. Silence finally worked for the right reason. Outside the nursery, footsteps passed, ordinary and unremarkable. Inside, a child slept, protected by records and resolve. Hannah's plan was no longer a hope. It was a file, a timeline, and a future. Justice had found its narrator, and it would not stop playing. Morning approached with warrants ready and doors prepared to open. The lie's time ended. Hannah's voice remained. It would guide what followed, steady, recorded, and impossible to silence. Everyone involved felt the shift and knew the path forward. Brielle Knox asked for counsel the moment the recording circulated. Strategy replaced confidence. She offered cooperation, framed as conscience, not fear. Prosecutors listened without reacting. They requested specifics. Brielle hesitated, then chose survival. She admitted presence near the apartment, not inside. She admitted pressure from Lucas, not planning. Each admission aimed to narrow exposure. Each created new obligations. Detective Ortiz watched posture shift from poise to calculation. Brielle produced messages Lucas forgot, promises typed late, instructions disguised as concern, reminders about timing. She presented them as context, hoping context would dilute responsibility. Instead, timestamps sharpened it. In exchange, she asked for leniency. The prosecutor explained the process calmly. Cooperation mattered. Truth mattered more. Partial truth complicated everything. Samuel Whitmore attended the meeting silently. He did not glare. He listened and took notes. When Brielle finished, he asked one question. Why now? Brielle answered honestly. Because the file exists. The honesty landed heavier than apology. Ethan Cole submitted a supplemental statement that morning, clarifying audible commands captured during intake, matching phrasing in Brielle's messages. Language has fingerprints. They matched. Lucas learned of the meeting through counsel and felt abandonment. He sent Brielle a message demanding loyalty. The message was preserved automatically. Demands read differently under review. By afternoon, Brielle's account unraveled. Her descriptions contradicted camera angles. Her timelines conflicted with phone pings. Her effort to control damage exposed intent. Ortiz documented each inconsistency without comment. A formal offer followed. Provide complete disclosure, devices included, accounts unlocked, calendars released. Brielle requested time. Time was denied. Deadlines clarified choices. She signed. Imaging began. The room filled with quiet work. No one comforted her. Comfort was not the task. Lucas attempted to intervene and was refused. His status had changed. He was advised to prepare. Samuel left the building and stood in cold air, steadying himself. He called a trustee and initiated changes protecting the child's future. Paper moved. Safeguards locked. As evening fell, Brielle's cooperation produced results. A shared note revealed planning language. A deleted photo cache showed proximity. A call log bridged gaps. Each piece reduced ambiguity. The prosecutor updated the charging memo. Conspiracy language replaced negligence. The case matured. Brielle sat alone and realized calculation had failed. Truth was heavier than leverage. She had bet on timing and lost. Across the city, warrants prepared. The system advanced. No drama, only sequence. That night, agencies coordinated quietly. Emails confirmed receipt, clerks logged chain of custody, and technicians verified hashes. Nothing moved fast, yet nothing stopped. Each confirmation reduced uncertainty and increased resolve. Ortiz scheduled morning briefings, prosecutors aligned statutes, and warrants were queued for service. Samuel reviewed guardianship provisions and authorized additional safeguards. Ethan prepared testimony notes, focusing on sequence and timing. Brielle watched alerts accumulate and understood cooperation had limits. Lucas paced his apartment, rehearsing statements that no longer mattered. The system preferred records to rhetoric and sequence to sorrow. By midnight, authority had shifted fully from narrative to evidence, leaving little space for performance. What remained was process, patient and exact, assembling consequences with the calm certainty of routine. It advanced without anger, spectacle, mercy, or delay, indifferent to pleading, immune to charm, and committed only to alignment, documentation, and outcomes that would arrive on schedule through lawful steps measured by clocks, logs, signatures, and verified times. By night, Lucas received notice of impending arrest. He stared at it, stunned. The bargain he never considered had exposed him through the person he trusted least. Brielle's deal did not save her. It completed the record, and the path to arrest was set before morning. The hearing room was smaller than Lucas expected, built for decisions, not speeches. Wood panels dulled sound. Fluorescent lights erased drama. This was not a courtroom for persuasion. It was a room for orders. Lucas arrived with counsel and confidence stitched back together. He spoke about routine, stability, and grief. He spoke about being a father. He avoided verbs that admitted harm. The judge listened without expression. Samuel Whitmore sat behind the rail, hands folded, eyes steady. He had filed for emergency guardianship supported by timelines, medical notes, and Hannah's recording. The paperwork was dense and merciless. It did not ask for sympathy. It asked for safety. A social worker summarized observations. The baby responded to consistent caregivers. Overnight arrangements mattered. Uncertainty posed risk. Her voice was calm. Her recommendation was firm. Claire Bennett presented exhibits. Calendar conflicts, missed visits, financial pressure. She did not argue. She aligned. Evidence speaks when aligned. Lucas objected, then corrected himself. He asked for time. The judge asked for facts. Silence followed. Detective Ortiz testified briefly to sequence. No accusations, just order. Ethan Cole confirmed medical timing and consent concerns. The judge nodded once. The decision came measured and immediate. Temporary custody transferred to Samuel pending criminal proceedings. Supervised access only. Conditions attached. The order read like weather, inevitable once formed. Lucas felt the room tilt. He reached for words and found none that fit the order's language. Fatherhood, reframed by safety. Outside, reporters gathered. Counsel advised silence. Lucas nodded, jaw tight. The building doors closed behind him with a final sound. Samuel received the child that afternoon. He held his grandson carefully, aware of weight and promise. He signed forms and accepted responsibility without celebration. Protection was the task. Brielle watched coverage and understood the shift. Leverage vanished when a child became central. She closed a folder and opened another labeled disclosure. That night, Lucas sat alone and stared at a photo he could no longer control. He told himself it was temporary. Temporary words comforted him. Records disagreed. Across the city, notifications updated, access restricted, schedules amended, the system recalibrated around the child's safety. It did not consider feelings. Samuel arranged care and routines. He placed a small notebook by the crib and wrote times and observations. He trusted writing. Ortiz filed confirmations. Ethan prepared follow-ups. Claire drafted next steps. The machine moved. By morning, Lucas's access was supervised by strangers. He complied and smiled for cameras that were not there. Performance could not change conditions. The hearing ended without applause. It left consequences. A child slept through it, unaware that protection had been ordered into place by ordinary people doing careful work. Lucas read the order again and felt the truth sharpen. Control had passed. The son, he claimed as proof, had become the reason restraint was necessary. The city continued. Buses ran, coffee brewed. In a quiet room, a judge's signature had redrawn a family. The law did not shout. It decided. Procedure favored the child. Risk assessments weighed environment, history, and immediacy. Supervisors signed off. Monitors scheduled check-ins. Routines replaced chaos. The order specified times, locations, and observers. Compliance would be measured, documented, and enforced. Any deviation would trigger review. The language was plain, strict, and protective. It treated safety as a process, not a promise, and assigned responsibility to adults, systems, and clocks. Nothing was left to interpretation. Mercy, negotiation, delay, discretion, convenience, shortcuts, habits, excuses. Today, when Lucas realized the order named safety over blood, he understood the case was no longer about him, and the loss had begun. The order did not end resistance. It provoked it. By nightfall, Lucas Whitmore shifted from compliance to pressure, testing boundaries he pretended to respect. He called intermediaries instead of witnesses, phrasing demands as concern, warnings as advice. He believed fear moved faster than courts. Samuel Whitmore received the first call at dawn. A man spoke politely about stress and suggested reconsideration for everyone's sake. Samuel listened, wrote down the number, and ended the call. He forwarded the note to counsel and did not discuss it again. Lucas tried subtler routes. He contacted neighbors, floated rumors, hinted at instability. The effect was brief. Records outweighed whispers. Silence followed. Then came the message left at Samuel's building. Not explicit, just enough. A reminder that accidents happened, that age made people vulnerable, that discretion protected families. The doorman reported it immediately. Cameras preserved faces. Ortiz logged the incident and requested patrols. Protective orders expanded, conditions tightened, access narrowed. Lucas complained about fairness and received procedure. Procedure did not argue. Brielle learned of the incident and withdrew further. Cooperation had costs. Threats increased them. She updated disclosures and stayed quiet. Ethan Cole noticed unfamiliar cars near the hospital and reported them. Caution became habit. Security reviewed footage. Nothing dramatic appeared. Documentation continued. Lucas escalated through counsel, filing motions challenging supervision. The judge denied them quickly, citing risk indicators. Indicators accumulate when behavior confirms them. That night, Lucas paced and rehearsed anger. He drafted messages he did not send. He sent one he should not have. It was logged. Ortiz requested a warrant extension based on intimidation. It was granted. The case widened. Samuel adjusted routines. He changed schedules, coordinated escorts, and accepted protection without pride. He focused on the child's needs, not his own comfort. The baby slept through changes, unaware. Stability held. Across the city, the system responded predictably. Threat reports triggered checklists. Checklists triggered actions. Actions created records. Records constrained choices. Lucas felt boxed in. He blamed others. He blamed timing. He blamed Samuel. He never blamed sequence. By morning, patrol cars idled near Samuel's building. Neighbors noticed and asked questions. Samuel answered none. Counsel advised restraint. Brielle's attorney requested assurances. Prosecutors acknowledged risk and documented compliance. Cooperation continued. Ethan prepared testimony and updated security badges. He moved through routines with care. Lucas received notice of investigation expansion, citing intimidation and witness interference. He read it twice. He called his attorney and demanded fixes. There were none. The city did not react. It rarely does. It processed. Pressure mounted without noise. Lucas learned that threats invite scrutiny, and scrutiny leaves marks. His words began closing doors. At dusk, Ortiz reviewed the file and noted a pattern. Control attempts followed loss of access. The pattern mattered. Samuel sat with his grandson and read quietly. He did not speak about fear. He planned. Paper traveled overnight. Forms updated. Conditions amended. The case absorbed resistance and grew stronger. By midnight, Lucas's options narrowed to compliance or consequence. He chose neither, hovering between them, convinced intimidation would restore balance. It would not. The system had noticed. The order stood, protection tightened, records multiplied. When Lucas realized threats only strengthened the case against him, he understood pressure had become proof, and the next step was inevitable. By the 15th day, time stopped behaving like an ally. It pressed instead, compressing options until Lucas Whitmore felt every minute as a narrowing corridor. Prosecutors scheduled a status conference, brief and procedural, the kind that signals direction without announcing destination. Lucas read the notice and understood delay was no longer leverage. Detective Ortiz assembled a clean packet for review. It contained nothing dramatic, only sequence. Intimidation reports, device extractions, financial trails, and Hannah's recording as anchor. Each item referenced another. The map closed loops. Supervisors approved escalation. Claire Bennett filed motions, consolidating guardianship protections with criminal proceedings, ensuring evidence stayed preserved. She wrote plainly, anticipating objections and neutralizing them with citations. Judges prefer clarity. The filings provided it. Ethan Cole met with prosecutors and confirmed availability. He reviewed his notes again, trimming adjectives, highlighting timing. He understood that precision convinces where emotion distracts. He signed an affidavit and returned to work. Samuel Whitmore received updates and made no public statements. He focused on routines for the child. Feeding times, naps, visits. Stability became his argument. He documented everything. Brielle Knox requested a second meeting and brought a spreadsheet. It detailed messages, transfers, and meetings she had not previously disclosed. Cooperation deepened under pressure. Prosecutors accepted and verified. The record thickened. Lucas attempted to regain initiative. He filed a motion challenging jurisdiction, then withdrew it when counsel advised consequences. He contacted a reporter and reconsidered. He drafted an apology and deleted it. Indecision cost him hours. Ortiz requested warrants for arrest supported by intimidation and conspiracy. The paperwork moved through channels with practiced speed. Approval did not require theatrics, it required alignment. Alignment existed. That afternoon, Lucas received notice of an impending appearance. The language was formal, calm, and final. He called Samuel and reached voicemail. He left a message about family and regret. The message joined the file. At dusk, officers reviewed plans. Timing mattered, safety mattered, procedure mattered. They coordinated quietly. The city breathed through traffic and rain. Ordinary sounds filled space where certainty once lived. Lucas packed a bag and unpacked it. He rehearsed statements and forgot them. He stared at the door. Samuel sat with his grandson and read aloud. The child watched lights move across the wall and slept. Near midnight, the warrant signed. Ortiz confirmed service for morning. Notifications queued. Systems updated. Lucas slept briefly and dreamed of clocks without hands. He woke to knocking and did not answer at first. Then he did. Officers announced themselves and waited. There was no rush. Lucas opened the door. He complied. Hands were guided. Words were read. Rights were explained. Outside, cameras did not gather. Neighbors did not cheer. The moment passed quietly. Lucas was escorted downstairs and into a vehicle. The door closed with a final sound. Back upstairs, paperwork continued. Custody schedules adjusted, interviews scheduled, the case advanced. By sunrise, the clock had turned. Delay was gone, sequence held. The system moved forward, indifferent to regret, committed to outcome, and prepared to finish what timing began. Paper followed process, and process followed law, until nothing personal remained unresolved. Every action created notice, every notice created duty, and every duty created consequence. Lucas learned that control fails when sequence is documented. Samuel learned patience can be active. Ethan learned accuracy protects the vulnerable. Ortiz learned silence is persuasive. The city learned nothing at all, continuing its rhythms, while justice, uncelebrated and precise, settled into place. It would endure beyond headlines, beyond arguments, beyond appeals, because records remain, children grow, and consequences arrive exactly when time allows for everyone. Morning broke gray and ordinary, which is how arrests should feel. Officers moved with courtesy and distance, repeating instructions without emphasis. Lucas Whitmore was processed quietly, photographed, fingerprinted, and seated beneath fluorescent lights that flattened every expression. There was no audience, there was only procedure. Detective Ortiz reviewed the intake checklist and verified times. She ensured counsel was notified and evidence logged. Each box checked closed a door Lucas once believed he controlled. The calm unnerved him more than anger could. Charges were read with precision. Conspiracy, witness intimidation, financial misconduct. Each count aligned to a document, a timestamp, a voice. Lucas nodded as if agreement might soften language. It did not. Across town, Samuel Whitmore received confirmation and said nothing. He fed his grandson, noted the time, and updated the notebook. Routine steadied him. Protection required consistency, not commentary. At the station, Lucas asked for water and received it. He asked to make a call and was allowed one. He dialed Brielle. The call rang unanswered. He left no message. Silence answered better. Brielle learned of the arrest from her attorney and felt relief mixed with dread. Cooperation had insulated her partially, not completely. She prepared to testify and organized exhibits again, discovering that repetition no longer soothed. Ethan Cole read the charging notice between shifts. He closed his eyes briefly, then returned to work. Patience needed him. Truth had moved beyond his hands. By afternoon, a brief press statement acknowledged the arrest without detail. No names were emphasized. The city shrugged and moved on. The case did not need spectacle. Lucas was arraigned quickly. Bail was argued and restricted, conditions stacked, travel limited, contact barred. The judge spoke evenly. The order read firm. Lucas searched faces for sympathy and found none. Procedure filled the space sympathy once occupied. He signed forms and was escorted back. Evidence review continued uninterrupted. Devices imaged, accounts reconciled, messages mapped. The narrative shrank to sequence. Sequence 1. Samuel met with Claire Bennett and finalized long-term guardianship steps. Trusts adjusted, safeguards locked. The child's future separated from the case's noise. That night, Lucas sat alone and replayed choices. He remembered moments he dismissed as small. He understood too late that small moments accumulate. Ortiz filed a final arrest report and scheduled next actions. She slept briefly and returned at dawn. The illusion ended without drama. Control dissolved into custody. Words lost power to records. Performance yielded to proof. Outside, traffic hummed. Inside, process advanced. Tomorrow would bring motions, hearings, and testimony. The outcome would take time. The direction was set. For the first time since Christmas, the clock belonged to the system, not Lucas. It would move steadily, without mercy or malice, until resolution arrived. The child slept, unaware that the night had closed a chapter. Protection held. Consequence had begun. It would take months to conclude, but the shape was fixed. Hearings would follow calendars, calendars would follow law, and law would follow records. Lucas would learn patience in confined rooms. Brielle would learn that cooperation has edges. Samuel would learn joy inside vigilance. Ethan would keep saving strangers. Ortiz would keep counting seconds. None of this required belief, only documentation. The city would keep moving trains and cleaning streets, indifferent to names. In that indifference, justice found room to work, quietly, completely. It thrives when spectacle fades, when records align, and when time is allowed to finish what truth begins without interruption or fear. That is how endings arrive, not loudly, but with certainty, restraint, and a future protected for those who survive afterward. The courtroom was colder than Lucas expected, stripped of theater and stripped of mercy. Wood benches creaked softly as people shifted, waiting for a process that did not care about faces. Hannah Whitmore's name appeared on the docket, followed by words like homicide, conspiracy, obstruction. Lucas swallowed and told himself names could be argued. The prosecutor stood and began with sequence, not story. She played the recording. Hannah left, her voice calm, deliberate, naming dates, money, fear. The courtroom leaned forward. No one interrupted. The audio ended without accusation, and its restraint carried weight. Detective Ortiz testified to timelines, cameras, and steps taken when intimidation followed the guardianship order. She spoke plainly, pointing to logs and reports. Ethan Cole confirmed medical timing, consent, and the moment Hannah tried to speak, he did not raise his voice. Claire Bennett aligned exhibits without flourish. Financial records met messages, messages met movement. Each alignment reduced doubt. Samuel Whitmore sat still, hands folded, eyes forward. He did not look at Lucas. Lucas rose when allowed, voice careful. He spoke of grief, stress, misunderstanding. He suggested illness. The judge listened and asked one question about sequence. Lucas answered and corrected himself. The correction echoed. The defense objected and was overruled. The prosecutor rested. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Lucas paced. He saw Samuel and felt distance sharpen. When court resumed, the ruling addressed safety first. The judge found probable cause supported by records. She ordered the case to proceed and set conditions. The language was precise. It did not comfort. Lucas sat as words closed around him. He understood the performance was finished. The court moved on to scheduling. Calendars opened. Dates were chosen. Outside, cameras waited and were ignored. The city passed by. Samuel left without comment. He returned to routine, to bottles, naps, notes. That night, the order circulated across agencies. Conditions tightened, access narrowed. The child's protection anchored every decision. Lucas returned to custody and stared at the ceiling. He realized the trial would not be about sympathy. It would be about sequence, and sequence had chosen. In quiet offices, clerks stamped, scanned, and logged. The case advanced without noise. Ortiz scheduled witnesses. Ethan prepared notes. Claire drafted motions. Samuel wrote times in his notebook. Hannah's name was spoken again before adjournment. steady and clear. It did not fade, it settled. The hearing ended with gravity, not drama. No verdict was reached, yet the path hardened. Lucas felt it as inevitability. Justice had taken the stand, and it did not look at him. It looked at records, children, and time. The courtroom emptied, the clock continued. What followed would take months, but direction no longer bent. Hannah's voice had entered the room, and nothing could remove it. Outside, winter light slid between buildings, indifferent. Reporters filed summaries that missed the quiet center of the day. Inside, the system prepared for trial, motions queued, disclosures scheduled. The machinery did not rush. It advanced at a pace that favored truth. Lucas thought of Christmas, of lights, of a tree that blinked. He understood now that blinking was recording. Memory had devices, devices had logs, logs would speak. Samuel closed his door and breathed. He was tired, not broken. He prepared for tomorrow, for testimony, for care. He trusted process because it held when people failed. In the holding area, Lucas heard the clang of routine. He waited. He had nothing left to rehearse. The next date was set, and with it came certainty, consequence, and an ending he could no longer delay or escape. The sentencing hearing did not resemble triumph, it resembled accounting. The prosecutor recited statutes and findings, each supported by exhibits already tested. The judge reviewed impact statements, then turned to Lucas Whitmore and asked if he wished to speak. He stood, voice thin, and spoke of regret without sequence. The court listened, then returned to record. The sentence arrived, measured and complete. Prison terms concurrent where law required, consecutive where conduct demanded. Supervised release conditions strict. Financial penalties imposed. Restitution ordered, contact barred. The words were plain and heavy. No gasp followed. The room absorbed them. Brielle Knox received her judgment next. Cooperation reduced exposure but did not erase it. Probation with monitoring. Industry restrictions. Mandatory disclosure. The lesson reached her without drama. She nodded once and wrote notes she could not change. Samuel Whitmore submitted a final affidavit and stood aside. The court acknowledged guardianship, trusts, and oversight. Protection was affirmed. The child's name appeared only in initials, shielded by law. That mattered most. Outside, winter had softened. Reporters waited for statements and received none. Counsel advised silence. Silence complied. That afternoon, Samuel executed amendments prepared weeks earlier. He altered his will, removed Lucas entirely, and redirected assets into a supervised trust for the child. He funded a small endowment for maternal care at the hospital, named quietly. He did not seek recognition. Paper bore his resolve. At the station, Lucas processed the sentence with shock delayed. Reality settled when doors closed. He learned schedules. He learned limits. He learned that control ends where custody begins. Brielle packed her office and returned keys. Her calendar emptied. She discovered that influence evaporates when records endure. The cost arrived slowly, then stayed. Ethan Cole returned to routine, treating patients who never asked his name twice. He carried the knowledge that precision can save futures, even when it cannot save lives. Detective Ortiz closed the file with a final notation and archived evidence according to policy. She felt no victory, only completion. That night, Samuel read to his grandson and marked times in the notebook. He placed Hannah's photo on a shelf and spoke her name once, clearly. He promised protection and kept it. The city continued. Trains ran, snow melted, law did its quiet work. The lesson of the year settled without ceremony. Violence was punished, manipulation was exposed, patience prevailed, records endured, a child was safeguarded, consequence matched conduct. In the end, justice did not roar. It wrote, it signed, it scheduled, it remained. And with that, the story turned from trial to life, from evidence to care, from grief to guardianship, carrying forward what could be saved and closing what could not, firmly, finally, and without appeal. Months later, appeals were denied, schedules fixed, and routines normalized. Samuel enrolled the child in daycare, met teachers, and built a circle of care. Ethan attended a small ceremony at the hospital, anonymous by choice. Ortiz trained a new detective and emphasized patience. Brielle completed programs, complied, and watched doors stay closed. Lucas learned time by count, not command, and consequences by rule, not rhetoric. The trust funded checkups, counseling, and college savings. Hannah's name appeared on no banners, only on forms that protected others. The ending was not joy, but it was right. Life resumed with boundaries, care, and memory intact, proving that justice, when thorough, leaves space for healing without erasing truth. The notebook closed, seasons changed, and the promise held as ordinary days accumulated, steady and quiet, ensuring safety endured while futures grew, measured, supervised, and free for the child and community. Years passed with the quiet insistence of routine, and the case receded into archives while life moved forward. Samuel Whitmore learned the rhythm of mornings with a child. Oatmeal cooling, shoes misplaced, questions blooming without warning. He answered honestly, briefly, and with kindness. He never lied. He chose timing. The boy grew sturdy and curious. He loved buses and pigeons and the way lights blinked on bridges at dusk. Samuel kept the notebook until it was no longer needed, then stored it with the files, trusting memory had found its place. Hannah's presence lived in ordinary acts: a lullaby at bedtime, a note in a lunchbox, a photograph on a shelf that caught afternoon light. Samuel spoke her name without heaviness, letting it exist as fact, not wound. The trust worked quietly. Checkups arrived on schedule. Counseling normalized grief into language a child could carry. College savings grew by increments that rewarded patience. Protection was practical, not symbolic. Lucas's world narrowed to rules and calendars. Appeals ended. Time advanced by count. He learned that consequences do not argue. Brielle complied and rebuilt a smaller life, constrained and watched. She stopped calling control wisdom. Ethan Cole remained present in a way that never demanded attention. He attended milestones by invitation, not obligation, and kept his role clear. When the child asked who he was, Ethan said, "A doctor who helped." It was enough. Detective Ortiz visited once, years later, and watched the boy kick a ball across a park. She smiled, brief and satisfied, then left. Completion did not require ceremony. One autumn evening, Samuel told the story as it was, measured and age-appropriate. He explained that a choice hurt people and that laws exist to protect the vulnerable. He said Hannah was brave and careful. He said truth lasts. The boy listened and asked one question. Was it my fault? Samuel answered immediately. Never. The city changed around them. Stores closed and reopened. Buildings rose. The river kept its pace. Life continued without apology. At a school assembly, the boy stood straighter when his name was called. Samuel felt pride unmixed from fear. He understood the work had succeeded. Later, as seasons stacked, the boy learned to ride a bike, to read late, to forgive small things. He learned boundaries and kindness. He learned that safety can be built. On a quiet night, Samuel placed Hannah's recording into a locked archive and closed the file. He did not need it anymore. The lesson had transferred. The future opened, unremarkable and precious. Ordinary days accumulated, and that was the victory. Justice had done its work and stepped aside, leaving room for life to grow without looking back, steady and whole. Years later, a wedding filled a small hall with warm light. Ethan stood beside Samuel, hands steady, offering a future built on care. Vows honored memory without trapping it. The boy carried rings, proud and certain. Laughter replaced fear. The promise was simple: kindness, patience, truth. They left together, not erasing loss, but carrying it gently. Outside, evening settled, ordinary and forgiving. The family walked home, held by routine, protected by law, and guided by love that had earned its place. Photographs captured smiles without shadows, and invitations faded into keepsakes. Morning followed, then school, then work. Life continued, repaired. The ending felt earned, balanced, and calm, leaving space for gratitude, remembrance, and a future chosen freely by those who remained. Time agreed, gently, that justice had closed the past and opened tomorrow. Safely, completely, and without regret. For everyone involved, at last now. The last chapter did not arrive with a gavel or a headline. It arrived with a morning routine, light through curtains, and a sense that breathing no longer hurt. Samuel Whitmore woke early, made coffee, and watched his grandson tie shoes without asking for help. Independence had arrived quietly. Ethan Cole stood at the window, listening to the city start. He had learned that healing prefers ordinary days. He set plates, smiled, and waited for laughter. It came, soft and unforced. They walked to the park together. Leaves turned underfoot, a neighbor waved. The boy ran ahead and stopped, then ran back, checking that adults followed. Trust had replaced vigilance. That was the measure. At noon, a small ceremony gathered friends who knew the truth and respected silence. Vows were simple, promises clear. Care would be chosen daily, memory would be honored without ruling. When rings exchanged hands, applause was brief and genuine. Samuel watched with gratitude and relief. He felt Hannah present, not as ache, but as compass. He whispered thanks and let the day continue. Later, the boy asked to visit the river. They stood at the railing and counted boats. Ethan explained tides. Samuel explained patience. The boy listened, absorbing lessons meant to last. In the evening, dinner simmered while homework spread across the table. Questions came and were answered. None were avoided. That was the rule now. Truth, scaled for age, delivered with kindness. Across the city, files slept in archives. Consequences held. There were no reversals. Justice remained, firm and boring, as it should be. As night settled, a lullaby drifted through the apartment. The same tune Hannah once hummed, now shared without fear. The boy slept easily. Samuel closed the notebook one final time and placed it away. He would not need it again. Protection had become habit. Ethan washed dishes and planned tomorrow. Work awaited. So did joy. Both were welcome. On the wall, photographs captured seasons. First steps, school plays, a wedding smile. They did not erase the past. They placed it where it belonged. Outside, traffic flowed. The city offered no judgment. Inside, a family rested. This was the ending Hannah asked for without knowing its shape. Safety, honesty, love earned and kept. Morning would come. It always does. And when it did, life would continue. Ordinary and strong, built on records, patience, and care. Carrying memory forward without chains, free to choose goodness daily. That was the lesson written beyond the law. When truth is preserved and children are protected, the future opens. Not perfect, just possible, and that is enough. Before sleep, Samuel checked doors and windows, a habit softened into care. He left a light on in the hall and a note on the fridge about tomorrow's errands. Ethan set alarms, then turned them off, trusting morning. The boy dreamed, murmuring fragments of stories, safe enough to wander. In another place, records remained sealed, sentences enforced, and routines continued as ordered. No appeals returned. No shortcuts appeared. Time did its quiet work. What remained was not revenge, but balance. A family formed by choice stood ready for ordinary problems and ordinary joys. They would argue, forgive, and grow. They would remember without being ruled. When the city slept, the apartment breathed, steady and unafraid, holding a future that had been earned the hard way by patience, proof, and love. Tomorrow would bring school bags, meetings, meals, and small decisions, all handled together, calmly, proving that endings can heal when care replaces fear, and truth guides every step forward for this family now. So, the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, truly still here, then something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of a pain you've carried. Maybe it reminded you that you survived something you once thought would destroy you. This story leaves us with a simple but powerful truth. We cannot control what others do, but we can control how we respond, how we protect what matters, and how we choose to move forward. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Hannah's life reminds us that even when circumstances are cruel, truth, patience, and integrity still matter. They may not save the moment, but they can save the future. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is learning to live honestly with what happened, without letting it define the rest of your life. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel less alone, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, remind, and connect. And most of all, thank you for staying until the very end.